Ellen! Here you are. Sorry. Let's see. That's Juliet. God, my eyes are so blurry. Ray. Nate. Larry. Grammy. LF Bill. Hey there. Gorson. Kay Schaefer Brown.
You and I stood against a threatening sky. Thunder songs gather in the wind.
This is your daily
Be still.
encouragement scope.
The voice of promise whisper near. Golden suns will surely rise again. Yearning to see by the light of our dreams.
Hey, thanks for the tweet.
Kissing the darkest night.
Unspoken. We'll find a way, you guys.
Simple faith is still worth keeping, no matter what they say.
Iceman. Love the hearts.
So stay right beside me.
Here's the message
Forever
today.
now, come what may, we will still believe in love, even when we
Morning.
fail. We will still be holding on. When days grow dark with fear, we will find a way. When sorrows touch us here, we will find a way to dry our every tear.
My eyes are so blurry.
We will find a way.
Tessie for Trump. For Superheart. I'll turn it down. So this album was my first album ever, and my partner Kamau Kenyatta produced and arranged it, and we had some really spectacular moments on this album. It was a first big risk into wondering if I could pull this off. And he wrote this instrumental, and I wrote the lyrics, "We Will Find a Way." And I was just sort of doing a blast through the past, because sometimes, guys, you have to go back into things that God took you through to see how good He's been and how far you've come. And so I played you guys the track "Don't Ask Me What I'm Thinking" yesterday as kind of a takeoff on soft landings for big risks with big mouth people. And I pulled this one out today because this is where we are. We are in a place where it's so easy to be drained by the darkness. And thank you for your share. So just play the end and we'll chat.
Day by day, climbing higher on our way, we'll touch the sky together when we're done. And there we will stand on the rock of our love, blessed with a sure and ever after.
Hey, Carrie, Rick. We're going to find a way. Now listen to these background singers.
We will find a way. We'll stand and view the land of our dreams. We will find a way. Together you and I will find a way. We will find a way.
Hey, yeah. There's a sister on this track. There's a sister on this track. Yeah. Anyway, there's a lot of people out right now who are giving you, there's Q drops coming in. There's analysis, there's research, there's questioning. And, every day I think, what do I have to offer? And honestly, I had to tell you the truth. If I felt like God pulled the plug and said, don't broadcast, I don't need to broadcast. I don't need to see myself out there. I took that whole week off before Pentecost because I just felt so drained. And I thought, who cares what I have to say? I mean, honestly, to be honest with you people, you already know most of what you need to know because of the Holy Spirit in you. You already know. The thing that happens in these kind of settings is this sense of communal awareness that we're not alone, that we're in this thing together, we're figuring it out, and we're part of a larger movement. But I'm going to guess that walking with God, there's much that He's already said and spoken into your heart that you know. And sometimes the most faith-filled thing you can do is turn off all stimulus and go have a party. Party in the reality of the victory and stand in that place. But there is something really affirming, and I'll be the first to admit, growing up and being a super lonely person, there was something about talk radio that really was encouraging to me. I got totally into Rush Limbaugh in the 1980s and 90s, really. And I'd have him on all day because it was like having a friend in the room, you know? And so there's a sense in which when we gather together and we're listening to periscopes or things online and having videos, that we are kind of in a community, and it's like the lovely, reassuring hubbub of a gathering where there's something good happening and you hear the voices in the room. So I get that. I totally get that. But sometimes, I wonder if the Father is lonely for us and is wanting us to shut it all off and draw away. And, by all means, if you need to do that right now, you can just hit the X and make me go away. But I did want to bring, for those of you who want to stick around, a moment of encouragement, because we are all in such a hot, pressure-filled environment. Remember last week I talked to you about what mothers know about pregnancy and carrying and bringing things forth, and how we are in a massive global pregnancy as the body of Christ, bringing something forth. And we haven't even hit third trimester yet. I'm going to say that birthday is going to be the election, right? And something is coming forth. And there is a distress and a change and a constant disequilibrium in the woman's body as all these processes just take over in order to make space and to continue to nurture this new life. Well, that's what's happening in us. We are in constant disequilibrium, and we're going to get increasingly uncomfortable, and things are going to feel out of control, and we're going to want it to be over. Did a whole couple of scopes last week about that, and about how if we understand that something in us it's a movement of offense, not defense. Something is growing and being birthed in the earth through the body of Christ. Primarily the remnant seems to really be on the forefront of this, and how it is it's really bigger than we are. When you're even a dad or a mom and you're pregnant, you really realize that what's been unleashed inside the mother's body is just bigger than anything you can even imagine. It's going to take over your world. Just to take your little newborn baby, to the doctors for the well baby checkups, it's going to require a deployment, every kind of vehicular device to get your kid there, the carrier, the stroller, the backpack, it's a deployment. This little thing this big is requiring just massive amounts of equipment. A C-140 practically flies into a parent's house and drops off all the stuff that you need for this little wriggling baby, and it takes over everything. And after the birth of the election, we're all going to be part of raising this little baby movement into the earth that's going to be even more destabilizing in other ways, right? So we need to keep our eyes on that. But what happens to people when we lose perspective and when we lose the awareness of what's happening around us? Everything. Our resilience and our ability to have capacity for what we are bringing into the earth, what's growing into us, what's happening around us, really drains away. And I want to encourage you guys that it's important right now that you have really careful and good self-care, that you are really watching how much of you is being drained and drawn out through which stimuli, which relationships, which activities, so that you, as a part of the pregnant body of Messiah, are really taking care of yourself because we're part of something bigger. And you can be in a great position, but if you're exhausted and worn out and you're not paying attention to what God is calling you to do in order to care for your mind and your heart, you can become part of the problem, right? And the enemy loves to take advantage of us when we're tired, hungry, in need of nurturing relationships, in need of just hearing from God. And so we've got to keep in mind, you guys, that while we're on this journey and we are continuing to learn to live in consistent risk, there are things that are very, very important in maintaining the integrity of the soul. And so you want to be aware of that, and you want to take care of yourself because it will affect everyone around us. Because also the enemy is taking advantage of our psychic consciousness. And I don't mean psychic as in occult. I mean just the psychological energy of a people that gets worried and upset and gets our head up our rear end and is anxious, and we're believing his story, his lies, his version of everything. You know, one time when I was really struggling, I heard the Lord say to me, Julie, don't let the enemy reinterpret your circumstances for you. And at the time, I was single and stupid and living in LA. And I was really wanting to marry. I was 26, 7, and I was going to the super cool church in Santa Monica, and I had the mullet, and I had the shoulder pads, and I was, but the guys I met were, it was kind of a lot of dysfunction junction, and everybody in LA is almost a something, right? You know, every waiter's almost got a record deal. Every person working a temp job's already almost got the movie deal, and everyone in LA's got a thing they want to get going, and they're in LA because they think the thing is there and they're going to do the thing, and the thing is going to, sign on the star and I'll make you a dotted line thing. And so I remember that I cried out to the Lord and I said, Lord, nobody ever asks me out. I never get dates. I'm really feeling lonely and upset. And I was driving around in my 1963 Dodge Dart, tan color Dodge Dart. And the Lord said, Julie, don't let Satan reinterpret your circumstances for you. You're feeling single, stupid, and living in LA. You're feeling lonely. You're feeling worthless. You're thinking in your value. But he said to me, but I've called you married. And he said, so that means you already belong to someone, so you should start acting like you have value because you're already engaged. He said, what you see as a lack of value is I see you setting you aside because I've already got that handled. You already belong to someone that I've picked. And you need to start acting like you're a married woman with that level of value and that level of worth. We need to start acting like parents. We need to start acting like the authorities in the room of the movement we're carrying. Do you realize that when you raise children, that you need to walk in authority? Because they will pick up, those little rascals will pick up the micro messages between mom and dad where you're arguing with each other and undermining one another. That little kid will pick up exactly how much they can manipulate you with your lack of clarity about your authority to set the boundaries and consistently reinforce them. Those little rugrats will test you over and over and over again, and they'll find out what you don't know about who you are and use that to manipulate you, when what they want intuitively is consistent boundaries. So that when you say no, you mean no. And one of the things we learned, as an aside, was we learned that we were to expect first-time obedience from our children with a happy heart, that there was no other outcome we were willing to accept. So if we asked a specific thing, we were to train our children to come across with first-time obedience with a happy heart. And when that didn't happen, we had to have first-time consequences. Because if you can actually train a child that you didn't mean business until the third or fourth time you yelled. That's when mom really means it, right? And then by then what's happened is you've lost control because you've asked and asked and asked and asked. And then what happens on the back end of that is that then you're angry. And then if you did do something like swat them or whatever, maybe you would be doing out of anger, as opposed to boop, little fleshy butt, knock it off. We meant it the first time. Or whatever, thing that you use needs to be a first time, not a fifth time, not a whatever. And the degree to which we know who we are and what we already are is the degree to which we will shepherd what we carry. That I would shepherd my value and worth to be able to present myself to my husband within the next year of that story we met, and to present myself as someone who was of worth. And the Lord said to me, don't let Satan reinterpret your circumstances for you. You're not single, stupid, living in LA. I've already called you married. I know exactly who you belong to, so stop whining and acting like you have no value. And it was interesting because then the convergence of things that happened, what my husband was praying about, the things that happened in his life, my father's intercession, the way we met, it was totally divine appointment, right? So we are constantly needing to be very careful that we don't allow Satan to reinterpret any circumstance we're in based on his version of things. So I was just talking to my dear friend yesterday who needed to do some self-care. And we talked a little bit about Elijah. And Elijah is up, running away, hiding under a broom tree, exhausted and whatever, and whining and feeling whatever, all those things. Why? Because Elijah was tired, hungry, exhausted, and needed refilling and refreshing. And he was allowing his emotions and his experience and then anxiousness because of how things landed. Remember, we talked yesterday about how when you risk and are obedient, there's anxiety that can happen before that. Very often after you give your gift, you write your email, you share your thing, you set your boundary. The bigger faith is afterwards, when you have to let it land. And you have to allow people to respond, and that may not be pleasant. So Elijah had to step into faith for the landing pad of his ministry of taking out those prophets of Baal. So he's up there, and he's allowing the enemy to reinterpret his circumstances. He's just smoked the prophets of Baal. Fire came from heaven. He's whooped those puppies. He's taken authority. He's dealt with spiritual powers and principalities. But now he's in a moment of vulnerability and weakness, and Satan is reinterpreting his circumstances for him. And all he can see is his own weakness and fear and anxiety. Well, this is what happens to us. And it's easier for Satan to reinterpret our circumstances when we're not in good self-care, when we're not rested, when we haven't really had a conversation we need to have with the Lord or with someone else, when we're not eating right, when we're not exercising, when we're not, for example, if you have an artistic side to you, you need to get there and get to the page and go ahead and write. You have a job that you've been putting off. You have a closet that you've been unwilling to clean, but it's weighing on you. The avoidance of things that involve taking care of yourself and taking care of business and facing a few things that you're putting off can have a great draining effect on your psyche, on your energy level, on your confidence. And so we need to be careful, and we need to realize when God said to me, Julie, you're already married, start acting like it. It was really interesting because I kind of started to say, well, I'm hot, man. I'm hot. I'm awesome. Why wouldn't anybody want to date me? I'm great. I mean, check it out. I'm married. I mean, God's picked out some, wow, and I dressed a little differently. I carried myself a little differently. I had some authority to tell my thoughts to go to, to the enemy to go to hell and my thoughts to come into line. And so we have to realize who we are right now. We are the pregnant mother of a great awakening in the earth. And we have the authority to shepherd that. And we have the authority to carry it. And we have the capacity. You were created for this. A good midwife will tell you over and over and over that your body was created for pregnancy if you're a woman, and tell you how it's all hardwired for everything that needs to stretch and open and increase, and what needs to be developing in you and around you, and how your brain handles it, how your body handles it. You have authority by virtue of how you were created to bring this thing to the earth. We're going to get it done. We're going to find a way. We're going to do this thing. And it's really, really important that we don't let the enemy reinterpret our circumstances for us and reinterpret our identity based on how we feel and what we're seeing around us. We have authority right now as intercessors and patriots to bring something forth in the next election season. Not only in the spirit, but in the natural realm. With our activity, our activation, our work, our ministries, our love, our acts of reconciliation. And we have authority to raise this thing up, to steward the move of God. And the enemy wants to keep us anxious and upset and worried. And when we do that, we literally feed the beast. We feed the beast. I think we feed the principalities and powers and the demonic spirits when we're in anxiety and we're questioning ourselves and worrying. And was I enough? Did I do it right? Was that okay? Do I really? Can I? Am I just single and stupid and living in America? Or, am I just this thing? No, we have to stand in the authority of what we're called to do right now. And sometimes that requires, well, a lot of times, all the time, it requires some really good, careful assessment and self-care. And Elijah, he did some good self-care finally, and God took care of him. And calm down, Elijah. You still did wipe out the prophets of Baal. I still did show up with fire. We still did clean the heavenly realms and kick the enemy's butt. And you just needed a nap, okay? And guys, that's where we need to always be careful, because we want to walk into any situation and be able to live out of heaven, see heaven, describe heaven, call heaven forth. And if we're swimming in our own exhaustion, lack of stewardship over relationships, our bodies, our time with God, it's very simple. It's not rocket surgery. It's very simple. The power of a well-governed soul. The Bible says, guard your heart, for from it flow the well springs of life. And right now we need those well springs. We need those well springs, and we're going to need them, and we need to keep our eye on the ball. Let's see, August, September, October. So beginning of August, we're going into our third trimester in terms of what God is bringing into the earth. And that's even trickier. It's harder. It's more intense, more symptomatic experiences of pregnancy, and very often more disruption in family systems as everyone sees and senses what's changing around us. So guys, these are just simple words, simple thoughts, and but something I wanted to bring to you today. We're going to find a way. We're going to do this thing. We have authority to be pregnant with the purpose of God right now, to bring forth a great awakening into the earth. We're in Pentecost, which means there's a lot of pressure against God bringing this thing forth. And, we simply cannot allow the enemy to reinterpret our circumstances for us. What felt like rejection, abandonment, lack of worth, and that I was all these things, was God's way of saying, I'm saving you a lot of heartache because I've got a guy ready for you. What feels to us like intense disequilibrium in the earth, what feels to us like chaos, what feels to us like injustice, what feels to us like abuse and abusiveness and corruption. There really is a story being told. There really is a purpose being brought forth in the earth. And one of the things I liked, if we want to just sit with the practical for a minute, is Brendan Dilley said this, and it stuck with me, that if you want, the battle has shifted, by the way. The battle has shifted to the states and the local level. And that's where all of us need to be putting in our work. And we're finding out what our health boards are like, what our sheriffs are like, what our representatives are like, what our governors are like, and their potential tyrannical leanings, and the power that we've given them. And the only way that that is ever going to be dealt with is if it gets bad enough and ugly enough that people rise up and say, I don't want that kind of local government. So I think our president and others are willing to let us live with 4, 5, 6 months of seeing what really happens when you have a Marxist worldview, and how government plays out, and how media plays out, left to our own devices. You know, the Lord said to Ephraim, leave him alone. I'm not going to talk to him anymore. I'm done with Ephraim. I'm going to stop. I'm going to let him be what he wants to be. That's one of the scariest judgments in Scripture, was when God said, I don't want to say anything more to Ephraim. I'm just going to leave him exactly the way he is, to let him do exactly what he wants to do. Heaven forbid you and I should ever be in that place where God turns his back on us and stops convicting us of our issues, right? Well, there's a sense in which in the earth right now, things have to be what they are, and we have to see what is, and we have to look our deepest fears in the eyes. We have to see very carefully the degree to which most of the earth is pretty brainwashed and already gone. We have to see the degree to which our institutions have been corrupted. You have to see the everything from NASCAR to football to whatever. And when you find out, for example, that China's one of the things China did was buy 30 to 40% of major, rather than trying to buy up and take control of companies in the United States, they just went for a major portion of the shares of so many of our major companies, our sports teams, our infrastructure settings, everything from the movie theaters in Hollywood and the companies producing our movies, largely controlled by China. When you see companies like Nike, you see different sports teams, you see that they go in and bought up a large enough percentage of our infrastructure, our companies, our land, our media, so that they never had to ultimately own it and deal with our federal government, but all they'd have to do is tank the stock. If Nike doesn't hold the line, tank the stock. And this is what's been happening around us. We have been bought and paid for and sold to China. And most of our institutions, including our major sports teams, and our media and our politicians, have been bought and paid for by China. But just enough that they can create, again, a total crisis by manipulating stock and so forth to tank a company's worth without actually owning the whole thing. And the enemy does that to us. He doesn't own us, does he? But he gets enough of a hold in our thinking that he basically shifts our thoughts and the story we believe about ourselves so that we'll just go along with it rather than face the shock of having to disengage from his authority. Okay? And so, my friends, it's possible that the darks in our story, which I talked about yesterday, have to do with the reality that we have to see how deep this rabbit hole is. And we have to allow our country to be in enough disequilibrium and upheaval for people to start thinking, I really do care about who's my mayor now. I really do care who my representatives are and my governor is and who they appoint. I care about my local judges because this is hitting home where I live. And one of the things that I want to comment on also is that remember just a few months, less than a month and a half ago, many of us were very concerned that our police weren't on our side because they very often across the country they were enforcing tyrannical, unconstitutional abridgments of our rights given out by the governors and the mayors. We can't have it both ways. We do need reform in our police. Whose interests do they have? We love them and we appreciate them and we need law enforcement, but we do need reform. Let's not forget that. Let's not forget how they trampled on a lot of people's rights by threatening to arrest mothers who took their kids to playgrounds or let their kids play out in their own yards with another kid. Guys, do you remember that? Do you remember how our rights were trampled on? It's true that rights of all Americans in many ways have been trampled on by forms of law enforcement. They need reform. but we also need good law enforcement, don't we? There's a lot going on. And what if part of the story and the importance of what we're dealing with means that in order for it to get better, it's got to come to the surface? We have to see what it is. We have to know what it is. We have to face our worst fear. And then we need to let God interpret it for us. What's he really doing? Is everything really coming apart at the seams? Are we really going to hell in a handbasket? Are we really stepping into the tribulation period? Or is this the provocation of a people to waken them? And is this part of the contractions of the birth of something God is doing in the earth? We need to always be connected to what his version of events are about ourselves personally and about our national story. And also we need to be really careful to make sure we stay rested, we stay connected to healthy people, we nurture ourselves in the presence of the Lord, that we eat well, we exercise, we stay strong, and we live out of the value how God sees us, as opposed to how we feel about ourselves and our situation. Not rocket surgery, I told you that. But sometimes it's important to hear, isn't it? And what if our deepest darks in our national story right now are the spark that is going to really ignite an even deeper awakening of our populace to say, wow, I really had no idea how far left we had gone, how much control we've been under, how dark it can go. Sometimes that has to be dealt with. You ask any alcoholic who's really turned around, or any drug addict that really turned around, and they'll tell you that they had to hit the bottom, had to smack the bottom, wake up in their own vomit, see what it really looked like, get what they really wanted, what they thought they wanted. How many times has the Lord let you get what you thought you really wanted, and then you go and you reach it and you realize there's no there. God is allowing us to see the obvious result of our choices as a nation. And that's a different version of a never-ending chaos with no purpose, isn't it? So, my friends, maybe the scariest thing for us to do right now is to take some careful care of ourselves, so we can, you contract and then you expand. And sometimes the contraction, the pulling in, the self-care, the awareness, the relational honesty. We need to do that, stay clear, get positive, get reconnected and refreshed, because we, my friends, are giving birth. We are loosing something into the earth, and we're staying mission critical with what we're called to do. Each one of us, aren't we? All right. Well, that's what I got for you today. Go do something that scares you every day. What I'm saying when I say that is, be intentional about what you pull back from, what you avoid, because what you avoid tells you what you believe. And if you'll always stay on that, wow, why am I anxious and nervous about cleaning out my closet? Why did I give that so much power that I have to run from it? Wow, I really don't want to return that phone call. Why am I feeling anxious and avoiding returning that phone call and setting that boundary? Wow, what do I really believe about that person in that situation that I'm spending my emotional energy running from returning a phone call? Wow, what do I really believe about the soft landing God has for me after the risk I just took, the ministry I just engaged in, the person I just spoke to, the prophetic word I just released? Wow, I'm running and I'm hiding. I'm afraid I'm going to get beat up and punished for trying. So I'm medicating, or I'm filling every moment so I don't have to feel my vulnerability. So what I say when I say do something that scares you, it's a lot about being very aware of what you consistently avoid dealing with, or feeling, or experiencing, or trying. Because avoidance shows you what you believe and how much power you've given to the fear that keeps you running from the next thing on the list to deal with, even if it's just resting, taking care of yourself, right? All right, you guys. Thank you so much, Dee Cleninger. And all you guys, I swear my eyes are so blurry. I could see some of the chat here. I'm glad you're there. And I will see you guys tomorrow.